Hi everyone, this is Claudia and welcome to clay balls and what we do with them. Okay, I'm going to show you the aerial view of how to center some clay, how to cone, and how to create a vessel and pull the sides up. Okay, so I did do a video where you could see it from the front, but now I'm showing you the aerial view, so it might be easier for you to position your hands. So you're gonna have a clay ball, right? This clay was nice and wedged. I mean, some people take it fresh out of the bag that they purchased it from and just ball it up. Other people, no matter what, will wedge it for, I don't know, 100 times or more to make sure all the bubbles are out and that it's nice and consistent. So that's up to you. And I'm gonna get a sponge. So all the tools I'm using here actually are gonna be used in are gonna come in a beginner kit. So you could definitely easily get that. Maybe $5 to $20 depending on what kind you get. Okay, so we have a sponge. It is damp, and what I'm gonna do is spin the wheel gently and add a bit of moisture. Maybe I need a little more moisture. And what I'm trying to do is just add a bit of moisture to it so that when I put my clay on, it sticks better. Okay, so that's done. I'm gonna pause the wheel and I'm gonna get my ball, and I like to smack it on center or gently press it on center. So I'm gonna eyeball where the center is, and I'm going to press the sides, rotate a little bit, press the sides until I feel like it's stuck on. All right, let's see. Yeah, it's sticking on. Sometimes I press the top just a tiny bit. I'm not trying to deform it. I do want it to keep its ball shape right now. I'm just making sure it's got the contact. All right, so I'm trying to wiggle it off and it doesn't move, so it's staying. Oh, and I know you see these gloves. I just have a couple cuts on my hands from working on my garage. So I'm trying to make sure that they heal, so I don't want to get a bunch of water on them. And I've actually used these before, not such a bad deal. So if for any reason you can't have your hands in the water for a long time, gloves should work. Okay, so now I'm going to get my sponge and I'm going to make sure squeeze some water out on my ball of clay and on my hands. And now this is for right-handers. You want your wheel spinning to the left. You're going to use your left hand to create that that force. So this hand, I have that elbow tucked into my hip so that it stays in place. Okay, so it's going to be the master of this clay. It's going to make sure to tell it where to go. If you feel any friction or any heat with your hand against the clay, that means your hand is dry, so please add more water, otherwise it's not going to work. And then you're going to use your opposite hand, your right hand, in a karate chop type of position. So I'm pressing down with this one, I'm pressing in with this one, and if I do those at the same time, and I have, like I said, the one in my left one tucked into my hip or my inner thigh, it gives me some good stability. So we're trying to make a little cake, right? I pressed it down, creating more of a seal between the clay and this wheel. And then another little secret that I like to do is kind of like if you're putting silicone between these two pieces, you want to put your finger and press between where the wheel meets the clay, and that creates another seal. All right, let me make this cake a little more cakey by pressing in. Okay. All right, so good enough. Now we're going to cone up. So what we're doing is we're pressing and gently pulling up. You're not trying to pull it up where you're like lifting it off of the wheel. You're trying to manipulate the clay to move up. So let's see if you can see that as I do it. Okay. Pressing and pulling up. And sometimes I get that little dimple there. I just make sure that as I'm pulling up, I kind of squeeze it out. Okay, so we got a weird looking cone. When we're coning stuff up, it actually helps us make sure that the clay works better on the wheel. Kind of follows the same motion as the wheel. Okay, so I usually cone twice. This one came out a little bit funky, but it's all right. I have my camera up here, and so I'm actually having to tilt my head over to the side, and that's not helping me out, but you know, let's not blame it all on the camera. Okay, so now in order to put this back down into a cake, I'm going to put my left hand, the heel of my hand here, just to kind of guide it. As soon as I squish down some of the clay, it's going to come up against my palm. And then I'm going to press with this top, my right hand, I'm going to press down and forward. So I'm pressing down and forward. And sometimes speeding it up helps a little bit, but I do need some more water. All right, so I'm going to do press down and forward, and then I'm going to morph this back into the karate chop and the arm of steel over here. However, my glove is very dry. Let's get some more water in there. Okay, we have another little cake going on here. Usually I want the top to be kind of flat, but I think maybe I'm pushing too much with this glove. We'll see. Okay, and I want to make another cone. So we're going to go ahead and squeeze the bottom and pull it up. See, that was so much easier. This clay is already becoming my best friend. So you'll notice, like I used to, when I was first starting, I wanted to skip this because it was just so much work. But I realized I was actually hurting myself because, or you know, my skills, because I wasn't able to manipulate the clay properly because I hadn't coned it. All right, let's push it forward and down. Okay, and we're making kind of a cake again. We're going to put the heel of our hand and the edge of our right hand up on the top to make the little cake. Looks pretty nice, right? Okay, now it's time to put a hole in our vessel. So whether you're making a cup, a bowl, or anything, you know, you got to start off with putting a hole there. Okay, so what I like to do is I'll use the index finger of my right hand, and then I'll use the index finger of my left hand, and I'm pressing down, and I'm just pressing down and keeping my fingers at a 45-degree angle. Okay, so just pressing down like this, like if this is the ball of clay right here. Okay, all right, so let's try that. Fingers are nice and wet, clay is nice and wet, and we'll press down. And like I said, if you feel any friction, gently get those fingers out of there and get some water. Okay, so I'm gonna get my pin tool, which is another thing you'll have in your kit if you get a beginner kit. I'm gonna stop the wheel, and I'm gonna find out how deep or how thick the bottom of that is. So I will poke the center. I will put my finger up against where the clay and the pin tool meet, and you'll see this is about the thickness of it. So that's maybe, let's see, half an inch. That's not bad. And if you're planning on trimming and creating a nice foot, that's good. You can also go down to 1/4 of an inch as you keep working on this. Okay, so I like the depth, so I'm not going to go any deeper, but what I am going to do now is I need to pull this out so the base gets bigger, right? So this is a ball of clay again, and this is the 1/2 inch that I just set up, and you're just going to basically go like this, right? All right, let's try it. We're going to get some water on the inside and the outside, and you're going to get those fingers, and you're just pulling them out on the wall, against the bottom of the dish and on the wall. Okay, and you go basically as wide as you want your vessel to be. Okay, I think that's good. And what I like to do is I go back and I kind of smooth that out. Sometimes it's a little, I push the clay back in. Sometimes I get this little tiny little cut. Don't want it. Okay, so you're just wanting to use your fingers to smooth the inside. And we can also use our sponge, wring it out. apply some pressure, you got a nice inside. And we can take some of that slip. So the slip is like that water and clay mixture, that's making some mud all around your vessel. You take that off. Okay, and as we're working with clay, we do want to make sure to take that slip off, because clay is absorbing water the whole time you're working with it, and the more water it absorbs, the more exhausted it gets, and at some point it could just turn to mush or flop down like, okay, I have no more resistance to what you're doing and I give up. Of course, you can, dry it out a little bit and reuse it later, but it won't be ready right away. Okay, so that's how big I want that bottom to be. Now I have to pull this clay up. So you see it's very thick here, and I've saved that clay there because that's the clay we're going to move up. So when we do the pulling, we're going to get this nice and wet. You're going to have your outside finger, which is, in this case, if you're right-handed, the right finger is going to be on the bottom of the outside. The inside finger, which is the left hand, is going to be on the bottom of the inside. And, I already told you there's a half an inch difference, right? So that's why one is lower than the other. And as you're pulling up, you're just pinching the clay between those two fingers to move them up. Now, because this is spinning, anything you do, even if you do it straight out, wants to go out a little bit. So as we pull, we're actually going to pull inward, as if there was like a string coming up from the center, and you're trying to pull this to touch that string. So we're going to go up and in at the same time. Okay, so let's start the wheel again. We want to make sure that the inside and outside are wet, as well as our hands. So I usually put my hand on top and I do the squeezing of a bunch of good muddy water. Make sure both my hands are nice and wet. And so I'll have this finger on the outside, this finger on the inside, and slowly pull up. As I'm pinching the clay, I'm also pulling inward, right? So you see that the vessel is not going to turn into a bowl, because that's not what I'm wanting to do right now. And in fact, when you're making a bowl, you don't want to pull it out that way just yet. You want to create the height. Okay, so normally I can do maybe 2 or 3 pulls before I have to clean the slip. But if you're new, you might want to clean the slip after every single pull, right? You're cleaning that water so it doesn't get immediately absorbed into the clay. And then you can take it, eyeball your piece as you're making it. It looks fantastic. Okay, we're gonna add some more water on the inside and the outside. Make sure that our hands are nice and wet, and we'll do that pull again. So I'm pinching and I'm pulling upwards and inwards. Okay, that looks pretty good. I want to also compress the top, so I'll use my right index finger to press on the top, and then I'll use my left hand index and thumb to pinch that rim. So this helps compress it, hopefully get rid of some extra water, and make it so that it doesn't have a bunch of cracks. And then we'll grab our sponge, squeeze it out so we can absorb some of that liquid that's on the inside. I'm going to press down on the inside so that the bottom is feels nice and compressed. Okay, good. All right, let's do another pull. I think this I want it a little bit taller. So we're going to squeeze some water on the vessel. I'm going to squeeze some water on my hands. And once again, we're going to pull. This finger's on the outside on the lower part. This finger's on the inside, about a half an inch above this one, because that's the thickness of the bottom. I'm pushing inward with this one, pushing outward with this one, pulling up, but pulling in at the same time. All right, let's try it again. Okay. Nice. So we're going to compress the rim, compress and pinch it. We're going to use the sponge to get rid of any excess slip. Okay, and then I'll give you the top view of making this piece production pottery ready. So we're going to use one of these, which is a wooden knife. You want to make sure it's nice and wet before you use it. And you're going to use it at this angle, right? So if it was flat and this pointy part was up, you're just going to lift this up 45 degrees and you're going to stab basically the bottom of this vessel so that you can give it a nice beveled bottom edge, which will give it some character. It makes it feel lighter and it looks more finished than having just this piece touch all the way to the bottom. But I'm going to move the top rim more inward so you can see that bottom piece being adjusted. Let me see if this works. So, I mean, you could do this too if you're trying to get a little smaller vessel or you're trying to round it out, but I just want to make sure that you're able to see what I'm doing. Okay, so I have my wooden tool in the correct position or orientation, right? And what I'm going to do is slow this wheel down a little bit, and I'm going to poke it at a 45-degree angle about 1/4 of an inch from the bottom, from the wheel, right? So I stab it, and you want to keep your hand nice and steady. Don't wobble around, right? So I've stabbed it, and now I'm going to flatten it out. And so you see I've separated that clay. Now this is very wet, so if I accidentally have this bottom clay stick back on this, it's gonna be hard to take off. I can do it, but I don't want extra work. So I'm gonna take it slow, create a little cut somewhere, and just start pulling it away. Right, and then you can use your knife to make sure to get that extra clay out. Nice, and it'll have a nice beveled edge. And then we can use our sponge to make sure and clean up the cut that we did so there's no burrs or little edges. And the whole of your pot should still be wider than this, but you can still put a sponge in here to absorb any moisture, any slip that might have actually gotten in there, because obviously it's moist regardless. Awesome. What a cute little vessel. Okay, now where did I put my, oh yes, okay, so we've made that finished edge. Now we need to wire this off. So the reason you want to wire this off is because if you leave it sitting on your wheel, even if you're letting it dry, the clay is going to shrink as it dries, and because it's stuck on it, it's actually going to end up cracking as it tries to dry, because the metal that it's on or this wood that it's on is not going to move with it. So you're going to grab your wire and you're going to wrap it around your fingers like this, right? So we have it straight, and then you're going to just do a little wrappy wrap. And of course, depending on how small your hands are or how big your wheel is and all that, you might need to wrap it again. So I usually do a little extra. And then what you're going to do is these thumbs of yours are going to be the piece that does not leave the bottom as you're scraping and wiring this off, right? Because if you accidentally like wiggle and you lift up, it actually will start cutting up instead of cutting across. Now you can cut straight across. Usually when you've made something fresh like this, it's easy for the wire to go through. However, you can have the wheel help you. So as you're doing this, you can just start the wheel gently and you're pulling it down, and bam, it went through. It's fantastic. And I can put this wire away for use on a later day. Okay, so the next thing is you got to lift this up. Now I have a wooden bat. So when you become a production potter, professional potter, you know, or you just really take this hobby to the next level, you're probably going to want some bats. So these are removable pieces of wood that you take off the wheel so that you can wire your pieces off, but then just leave them like that so you don't have to handle them until they dry a little more. But most people don't start off with that. So I'm going to show you how to lift this up. So what you want to do is, another thing you want to have with you is a little towel. You want to get as much clay off of your hands as you can with a sponge. and then wipe the rest off in a towel. I mean, you could have your apron, but at a certain point you don't want to put a whole bunch of clay there. And you do want to have whatever place you're going to put your pot at, you want to have it ready so you can put it, right? So I'm trying to clear some space. So usually you put it on a wear board. Sometimes that's a, MDF board or somewhere. You want to have it ready, because if you move this and you don't have somewhere ready, you just hold it onto a pot that you can possibly warp. Okay, so my hands are dry. I wiped them, and I already wiped the slip off of this with my sponge. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to grab it gently, right? So with my palms, and then I'm going to lift it up. See? Ooh, that was so easy. And I'll gently place it in the safe place I was going to place it in. So now you're left with this mess. You could try to wipe it with a sponge, but usually it's easier if you use your wooden rib that comes in most beginner kits. You let this thing spin. You kind of just scrape off the clay. Nice, right? And then, the big glops of clay, you want to have a nice bucket where you're putting this versus the slip, which is the bucket that you have with your sponge and water, because this will dry faster to reuse sooner, right? So the clay that you don't use today, you're gonna dehydrate it sort of until it gets to the right consistency again. You'll wedge it and you get to use it again. All right, so this board is mostly clean, right? So whenever you're working in a public space, you're borrowing wheels, you're gonna have to clean your wheel after. If you're going for studio time, or of course your own wheel, you want to make sure to clean it as often as you can. So you use a nice little sponge, get the excess, make sure you get the edge. So for the metal wheels, you definitely want to do this because they can rust, right? So they'll just start getting the patina, and you don't want that. Anyway, so there you go. We did that in just a few minutes, and hopefully you get to try this at home. And if you have any questions, if I miss anything, please let me know and I'll make sure to answer them. All right, see you next time.